Up nose first in a nearby field. Police told the BBC 4 passengers had minor injuries. Investigators are looking into this one. A judge today denied requests to delay the Boston bombing trial and move it out of Massachusetts. That means jury selection is set to begin this Monday. Lawyers for the suspect, Johar Tsarnaev, told a judge they would not be able to get a fair jury in the Boston area because, as they put it, virtually everybody in the city is a victim. But prosecutors said moving the trial would create a hardship for the people hurt in the bombing as well as their families. Prosecutors say Johar Tsarnaev and his brother Tamerlan detonated 2 pressure cooker bombs at the Boston Marathon in April of 2013. The explosions killed 3 people outright, injured some 260 others. Tamerlan Tsarnaev died in a shootout with police several days later. Johar Tsarnaev has pleaded not guilty to 30 charges. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. The judge says the court has called more than 1,200 people for jury selection. Former prosecutor Dan Shore joins us now. What about his attorney's, idea that he can't get a fair trial anywhere in Massachusetts?
Well, it's a standard motion you'd expect them to make, but it's not going to win because there are high-profile trials everywhere around the country that involve people accused of heinous crimes, and they get fair trials. It's harder to pick a jury. It takes time, but ultimately you will find enough jurors and alternate jurors who say they will be impartial and only base their decision on the evidence, so he'll get a fair trial.
Obviously, if they're picking 1,200 people, from which to choose a jury of 12, and I suppose there'd be some alternates in a case as big as this, they're looking at a 100-to-1 ratio.
Right, it's difficult. A lot of people will be emotionally involved. You'll have jurors at jury selection say they can't be fair, and those people will be excluded. And ultimately, you will find the jury that will be sat here. It's going to take a while, but it's not a reason to move the trial. Besides the fact that everyone is upset about what happened that day, not just people in Boston.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence against this guy. Let's just imagine at the end of this thing, they take it to the jury. The jury, takes an hour or two, comes back with a guilty verdict. Does the lawyer then get to say, look, I told you, Judge, these people were prejudiced against my client?
Well, they could later raise that on appeal. They're actually going to an appeal court right now to try to stop the trial from continuing in Boston. That's one of the issues they may use, but ultimately it will be tried in Boston, and you will have a fair trial. And then if he is convicted, then there'll be another phase to decide whether there's the death penalty imposed on him.
So this may be more of a delay tactic than anything else?
It's a delay tactic. It's also raising an issue that you can use on appeal later, because this whole trial isn't about guilt or innocence. There's overwhelming guilt, as you said. It's about, will he get the death penalty? Can the defense attorney save his client's life? And does he have enough appealable issues to later use to try to avoid the death penalty if the jury does give the death penalty?
All right, so imagine the voir dire here. If, as you say, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence, including this letter that Johar Tsarnaev supposedly wrote in the boat where they eventually found the guy. What do you say to jurors? If you're presented with this overwhelming amount of evidence, can you still be fair? How do you ask those questions?
The lawyer is going to be targeting jurors that he thinks he or she might be sympathetic to the defense. So they're going to be fleshing out his personality, fleshing out his history, and you do that not only through jury selection, but also at trial. You'll probably see the defendant's lawyer say that the older brother put him up to this. That's not a legal defense, but they only need one juror to not vote for the death penalty in order to avoid the death penalty.
And obviously they're going to be looking for jurors, the defense is, they're going to be looking for jurors who might be amenable to voting that way.
Right, someone who's sympathetic. Now, you can't be on the jury if you're against the death penalty. In order to be on a death penalty trial jury, you have to be at least open to the death penalty, but the defense attorney will try to figure out who's more likely to vote no on death.
But again, with the turmoil that this caused, Boston and the surrounding cities, it's going to be tough to find somebody who doesn't get up there and say, I think the guy's guilty and I think he deserves to go.
It'll be tough, but remember, Massachusetts is a city that is generally less favorable towards a state that's less favorable to the death penalty than other states. They're emotionally involved here, but they don't have the death penalty. This is a federal prosecution. That's why there is the death penalty here. So the defense attorney has a tough job here, but it's certainly doable, and you'll see a tough fight here.
So even in a state that doesn't have the death penalty, they might get a a conviction and a finding of death.
Right, because it's not a state government prosecution. It's a federal prosecution in Massachusetts, so the death penalty can be sought. If it was a state prosecution, you would not have a death penalty.
Dan Shore. Dan, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, video has emerged showing people stuck in a deadly stampede in China on New Year's Eve.